Brian, welcome to the Z Learning Podcast. Thank you so much for being here today.
Well, my pleasure, Zeb. Thank you.
So, Brian, take us back to the beginning. You grew up in Brooklyn, correct?
That's correct. Proud of it.
Awesome. What part?
Grew up in East Flatbush mostly, went to Tilden High School, and then eventually went to Brooklyn College. So I'm an all public school guy.
Cool, awesome. I was actually living in Crown Heights till recently, so very close by, next neighborhood over, I think. So, how did you get started in business? And if you don't mind me asking, how does a white Jewish guy from Brooklyn end up building two of the most successful African American hair care brands on the market today?
Well, it's a involved question, and I'll try to break it down a little bit for you. One of the things, Zeb, that I'm very passionate about is kids working when they're young, and kids getting business experience. And I'm very passionate about it because it doesn't exist anymore. It's very hard for a young person to get a job. All kinds of laws, all kinds of regulations, all kinds of lawsuit problems. But I'm so old, actually. I'll be 66 this year. That I started out with a thing called the paper route. It's very quaint to talk about that, but I had a route. I had a bag. I went and delivered the papers every morning. Once a week, I went and collected the money. And that began my whole process of understanding little things about business. Like I said, collecting money and who's not home, who says come back a week later. I did other things as a kid that I didn't think were very important at the time. But as my business career went on, I realized they were. One quick lesson I learned, I was shoveling snow with a friend, also something kids don't do anymore. And we had a very big corner house, and we were shoveling for an hour. It was the old days. It was snowing like crazy. And we both said to each other, we can't wait to finish because we know we're getting $10. This was back in, the 70s, right? And we worked and worked and worked. We rang the bell. The person opened the door. They handed us $2 and they slammed the door. So at 10 years old, I learned the lesson that you can't negotiate at the end. You have to negotiate at the beginning. And then I went through a series of jobs, things like selling sodas in the park. I sold the thing called, this round thing in the old days, this round piece of plastic. It was called a record. And I sold records on the street. I sold jewelry on the street. I eventually became a waiter and did that for like 6 years. Loved that, exposed me to different cultures. And I got my first quote unquote real job out of college for Motorola. And that was back in the late 70s. Many people thought it was a big thing. I got a company car. I was a young kid, expense account. I had a territory. And I was selling communication equipment. But imagine this is before cell phones, no cell phones. And anyway, I did that for about 6 months, and I was very clearly not a large company kind of guy. I was always thinking about business. And to complete this story, my father came to me one morning, and my father was a guy that ran around. He worked for Sweet and Low, the sugar substitute. He was a trader. He was trading with guys. He was making deals. He came to me one morning and said, hey, one of my guys has a son who's doing some black cosmetics. That's the exact line. It's a family story. And I said, black cosmetics? I'm a Jewish kid from Brooklyn. What are you talking about? And he came back to me a month later and said, I think you should talk to this guy. I think you should talk to this guy. The guy who did eventually become my first partner was also white, but his father owned a health food store in a black neighborhood. So that's how this whole thing started. Literally, when I got involved with the business, I invested $8,000 that my parents lent me. We had 5 health food stores in Brooklyn selling the product. And 17 years later, we sold to Revlon in excess of $40 million. So wow, I'm giving you, of course, the short version, but it was a very wild, amazing entrepreneurial ride. And I have to say, Zeb, in a different era, bricks and mortar, no cell phones and no Amazon. And
yeah, we're gonna get into that. But that is quite an exit and quite a story, like a real entrepreneurial journey. And one interesting observation, just it's very interesting. I think a lot of entrepreneurs, at least especially ones from the previous generation, a lot of them got their stripes with paper routes, selling, or like you said, shoveling snow, selling things. Another Brooklyn entrepreneur I had on the past on this show, Brandon Steiner, he also had started with a paper route and selling stuff on the beach, and very similar. And it's true, a lot of people don't know. A lot of people, it's the younger generation. A lot of people might know how to sell things on eBay and stuff like that, but maybe not as much in person. And that's definitely a great skill for learning about people. And it sounds like you learned a lot of important lessons early on from doing that work, like you said about negotiation. So very interesting. So, okay. What, if you don't mind me asking, what do you think inspired you to be an entrepreneur? Like, obviously you did a lot of these things at a young age. Would you say it was your parents? Did they inspire you? Who were did you have a mentor or mentors? Like, what inspired you to have the chutzpah, let's just say, to go out there and do things and be such a, you said you're not a company corporate kind of guy. What made you such an independent person who was willing to go out there and get what you wanted?
Well, a part of the story is my parents, who I thank for something, excuse me, which was at that point in my life, they were not successful. My mother never worked. My father had a series of odd jobs at that point. He eventually became pretty successful, but not during my first 17 years. So the fact was, if I wanted things, and it's very funny to think about that in today's world. Most of us, the kids want things, here, you get it. But back then, if I wanted certain things, I knew, hey, I'm not going to my mother and asking for $10 or $20 or anything like that. So the idea of, hey, I got to work to earn was something that started very early on. And, you said mentor. My father was one of my mentors for sure, because my father had the ability to meet anybody and that person is going to like him in 5 minutes. That was my father. My father was a hustler. He was working weekends and things like that. When I got to be 17, my father started to be successful, but he was a hustler. The other mentor I had very early on, I was 16 when I got my waiter job, was an Italian owner restaurant who started as a waiter. He started as a waiter. He worked almost 20 years. Adam Leotti, a great man. And he eventually bought the place and became the owner. He was a guy that had a skill with people also, had ability to read people, make them feel comfortable, very comfortable. And that restaurant was called San Marco, and it was just an enormously successful place in Brooklyn for many, many years. So, I'll mention one other factor a little bit later, but was always there for me. And I don't mind saying this, I'm not sure many people will. Fear can do two things. Fear can paralyze you. Okay, we know that. We see something scary, we go, we can't move. Some people can't move. Their fear can paralyze them, but fear can motivate you as well. And my fears were fears of, hey, I want to be successful. I don't want to kind of be in the situation I see my parents in. That went on a little bit later when I got married for the first time. Fear to, hey, I got to support my family now. I have bills to pay. I have my own home. So I always tell people, don't be afraid of fear. Okay, we all have it. It's a natural human tendency. And I think it can be channeled to really, really help and push you along in your entrepreneurial career.
Great point, and thank you for being brave enough to share that. I think that a lot of people like to focus on the rah-rah kind of stuff. They don't always go into that element. And I'll say, being in marketing and advertising, I know better than most that fear is a very, very powerful motivator. It is human nature. And you're right, you can channel it, I think, productively if you don't let it cripple you with anxiety, of course. So let's go into you, Brian, as a brand builder. You built two very successful African American hair care brands, including African Pride and Dr. Miracles. Tell us a little bit about the story behind them. Like, which one did you build first? tell us a little bit about how it started and grew. And then, if you can go into maybe a little bit how you then went on to the next one.
Sure, sure. Well, African Pride started first in 1991, and the reason I mentioned that date is because I started in business in 1981. So this is another part of the story. Most successful people get a little bit tired of hearing that they don't understand regular people and they've been successful their whole life and they had an overnight success. So I always try to say to people who I have an opportunity to say, hey, my overnight success took 10 years. I had a brand called Always Natural, which used powdered herbs in it. Consumers did not know what it was. Some thought there was dirt in the product. It was a 9-year push, like a 600-pound stone straight up. But we persevered. And I think that's one of the key things to say is have perseverance. Lots of doubt during those first 9 years, lots of no's, lots of this isn't going to work, lots of we don't understand it. But then in 1991, 10 years later, I was at a trade show. It was actually 1990. I was at a trade show and all of the major brands were putting on their extravaganzas. And back then that had to do with stage shows, with models, with dances, with video. We were the small guys. So this was something we weren't involved in. But these guys back in the day were spending $100,000, $150,000 on these trade shows. But I was wandering the trade show for 2 days, and all I kept seeing was these Afrocentric things, Afrocentric books, Afrocentric clothing, Afrocentric clocks, jewelry. It was all over the hall. The main companies weren't looking at that. They were doing their shows, and I was there going, wait a minute, what's going on here? And that's when I came up with the concept of African Pride. I had 10 years in the business already, so I had good contacts. Everybody knew me. I had the ability to take it to the top distributors and the top chains. And African Pride took about 6 months, 8 months, really slow, a little scary for me. At that point, I'm happy to tell any of your listeners, I had $0 in the bank, zero, because I had reinvested in this new brand. And the first 8 months was a little slow, a little tricky. But then that thing took off like a rocket ship. And it took off because we had connected emotionally with the consumer. That era, if you remember, if you looked at an office building in Manhattan, you would see women walking around the streets in kente cloth, lots of them. There was Afrocentric education. There was Afrocentric poetry, books. So it was a movement that hasn't gone away, but it had a different slant back then. And African Pride, just say 1 year, we quadrupled the business. We took it from 4 to 16 million in 1 year and continued to grow it after that. And it was a tremendous success. People say to me, why did you sell? Classic, that's always the question. Why did you sell? Why did you sell? Most entrepreneurs sell because they believe, and they're the guys on the inside, that I've peaked out. I can't take this thing any further. Okay, I don't have the financing. I don't have an international distribution system. Revlon did. And part of Revlon's pitch to us, and Revlon came with 13 people to our management presentation. You would think they would play poker with us. At the end of the presentation, they said, we want you, me, and your CFO. They cleared the room out. 5 of their guys sat down and said, we want to buy this company. So there was no playing poker with us whatsoever. They wanted it. And they said, hey, we have distribution in Brazil and we have a plant in South Africa. And they did. And we have great distribution in the EU. And I say something else to whoever's listening. The purchaser will usually talk themselves into buying something as much as you are selling it to them. And they did. And they did. I worked at Revlon for 1.5 years. I was my title, I was president of the Ethnic Products Group worldwide. A nice fancy title, didn't make me feel very excited. And I went to work and tried to work there. But what I found is that my role at Revlon was screaming at the HR department all day long because they said I couldn't hire another person. We had a corporate hiring freeze, or one person couldn't get the next title I wanted them to get. So the first 9 months were, excuse me, were kind of entertaining, I'll say, like fun, like playing a little puppetry game. But very quickly it got boring. Revlon then got into some financial difficulty. The stock was trading at 52, went to 9, eventually went to 2. And the whole place became in a really a survival mode because there was a chance they were going to go bad. So that sale happened. It was one of the most exciting things that ever happened in my life. Absolutely. I can just say to whoever's listening, the moment came where we did a letter of intent. We went to Revlon's building at 6 o'clock, 625 Madison. And I just couldn't believe, to this day, I can't believe it. You know, we went in, we signed those papers, then we did some more due diligence and eventually closed. When I left Revlon, I had a 3-year non-compete. I had a 5-year, but I used 2. And to be honest, I was never going back into the ethnic business, like ever. I got out on top. I had an amazing story. And why ever do that again, you know? So what happened is I just went through a couple of other potential deals in other industries, never got too deep, looked into them, had some consultants. I was interested in opening a spa for African-American women. That was one of them. That project didn't go. And before I turned around, the non-compete was over. And my wife, who I think is part of the story, because my wife is from Africa, okay? She's from Africa. She's from Liberia. We have 4 beautiful children. One morning she came to me. I hadn't shaved in 5 days. I was wearing my robe. I was a little depressed, if I can say that, right? Like, now what? I just sold my business to Revlon. And she said, you're going back into the old business. And I laughed. You know, it's a story in the family. I laughed. They said, why would I do that? Anyway, eventually I started to come up.
You said to her something like, every time I try to get out, they pull me back in, huh?
Yeah, I mean, kind of like that. Yeah. And she said, everyone knows you. And, and by the way, in that industry and most personal care industries, the guy that sells, you never see him again, very rarely. So the short version, I start to go do whatever I do. I come up with names, with concepts. One morning I call her, I say, excuse me, I say, I have a new concept, Dr. Miracles. And she looks at it, my wife, and says, I don't like it. I say, I do. We came to market with that product in 2004. In 4 years, it attained the sales that the other one had in 17 years. Dr. Miracles took off like a rocket ship. A lot of it had to do with the formulation of the product. I had a concept of putting a tingling on the scalp, which took 2 years to really get, chemically the way we wanted it. But that product took off like a rocket. We came out with a relaxer kit. My wife was on the box. She's a former model. And we sold 20 million units of that in 4 years. So we had amazing success. Again, we started getting the calls and the letters, of interest. These were coming more from private equity groups. At that point, private equity was really in vogue. We actually had, I think, 27 or 28 offer letters, which are not binding. We had 2 groups that wanted to come in before the process started and see if they could beat the other guys to the rush. There was one group in right here, I'm pointing here, you don't know where I am, but I'm pointing to Greenwich, Connecticut. There was a group called Catterton. I don't think I'm allowed to say their name, so I'm kidding, take that out. But
Okay.
I'm kidding. They came in, they wanted to supersede the process. They came in early and they were serious. They wanted the company and they bought it. And private equity sell like 70%, 75%. They want you to maintain some. This way you still have skins in the game. They're very nervous, private equity, about giving a guy a boatload of money and he still has a little piece. And what's going to motivate him? With me, they didn't have that problem because I had done it already. I sold the Revlon company to them and now I did the second company. So we went to work and a crazy thing happened. It's called the recession of 2008, 2009. It hurt the business. The whole idea of private equity, I'll just say it quickly, is I'm the business guy. I'm the one who started it. I'm the one who created it. We're the guys with the money. We're going to give you the money to keep this thing growing. Once the money guys start to get into the daily operation of the business, disaster for me. And I would just end it by saying, and I don't know if many of your viewers know this, 8 out of 10 companies purchased by private equity are destroyed. They're looking for the 1 or 2 home runs. They're not in the single game or double game. They're in the home run game. So they're looking in the portfolio. What could go? This company had a company called Frederick Fekkai, who was a famous hairdresser. They had bought it and quietly sold it to Procter and Gamble for over $400 million. Those were the deals they were looking for. So about exact same time with Revlon and private equity, 18 months, my tenure ends, and I move on to my next adventure.
Awesome. Wow. And it sounds like even after all this success and all this experience and building brands, you're still not done yet. And I know you have more ideas in the tank, and you have new ventures and projects that you're thinking about. We'll go into that. If we could just go back a little bit, you know, thank you for, breaking down how you kind of started those 2 brands. I'm curious if you could take us back, because I think it's an interesting story. Like you said, there's no overnight success, and your overnight success was 10 years. And I think it's interesting for people, especially a lot of people who may be listening to this that may be in the earlier stages of their business, or maybe thinking to leave their job and start a company. Take us back a little bit to, I think when you started the story, you were at a trade show, and you were spending money on the trade shows, and there was, I think that at epoch, that period, you said, I think that was like the early 80s or the mid 80s. I know in hip hop there was a movement, like you were describing, that there was like a African kind of pride movement, and I think you rode that wave with that brand, which was a great idea at that time. Am I correct about the time? That was like the early 80s,
Well, it was more like
late 80s.
it lasted for a while, but when I first noticed that trend, I'll call it, it was the late 80s, 88, 89, 90, and then we came out with that brand in 91. And
Right. Okay. That makes perfect sense for what I was thinking. Okay. So now, like, let's go before that. When you were just kind of hustling around, and after you got, the $8,000 loan, you partnered with this guy, or you met this guy, who was in the African beauty product business. Like, how did it go from there that, you met this guy, and then you got to the place where you were, you launched African Pride? Like, how did you, once you just got started, how did you, get customers? Take us to the very beginning, if you
Sure.
can.
Well, listen, let's go back. There was no African Pride, and those are the 10, tough years. But the beginning, literally, we had 3 SKUs, and my partner had 4 or 5 health food stores that his family knew in Brooklyn selling the product. So this was the first epiphany for me. Why? Pieces of paper showing I bought 24 pieces. 2 weeks later, 24 pieces. 3 weeks later, 24 pieces. In today's world of metrics, it's almost funny, but that was the metric for me. I said, this stuff is turning, right? So what we did in the beginning is we went health food store to health food store in the car. It sounds so quaint today, right? We had a display. We went in. We had a product called Indian hemp. The health food stores knew what that was. It was written up as being excellent for hair growth. And they knew it because they were selling it, but they weren't selling it in a form, in a product. We would literally go into a health food store and say, hey, how you doing? We have this new product. We'd like to show it to you. And there was always interest if they had a Black, constituent, because they knew more about that. And we would say, they'd say, it's very interesting. When can we get it? We'd say, in 5 minutes. We'd go in the car and we'd set it up. Now, the strangest part of this story is 90% of them wrote us a check on the spot. I mean, this is another era here, right? We put it in, they write, and they become a customer. So now we do that. We go New York, we go Newark, we go Philly. One day we're out in the car, me and my partner, we say, we can't keep driving. We got to go back and ship the orders. This is a true story. And we came back, and then we came out with a mailer, very interesting mailer, pink envelope, talking about if you have Black customers, we have what you need. We would mail it, and then a week later we would call the store. Now we did that for over a year. And at that point, we had close to 700 health food accounts, coast to coast. We had a business like $300,000-$400,000 a year, a business. And we started getting calls from some of the big distributors who serviced at the time, Kmart, Target, people like that. They called us. Oh, we see this product. It's selling. Could you sell it to us? And that's how we started. There was a company up in Hartford, Connecticut called Beauty Enterprises. They were the largest distributor of ethnic products in the world. We got in there and we started to sell there. And again, very tough years, but that brand went from zero Always Natural to $8.9 million 10 years later. So it wasn't a nothing brand. It was profitable. It was growing. But when you put African Pride in the market and in less than 3 years, it's doing 25 million, you can see the difference. But the difference of African Pride would have never been able to be in existence or never been as successful as it was if we hadn't laid the foundation with the 10 years before. So, listen, I think, Zev, I have children, I have a lot of children. I think everyone is in a I want it now mode. And, it's great. Hey, I want it now too. But the reality is, I don't know any endeavor, business, sports, entertainment, where you get it immediately. I've never heard it. It's all about 90, you know what Albert Einstein used to say, 99% perspiration, 1% inspiration. That's the formula. And it's so powerful because it's true. So, there were tough years there for sure. And I said it earlier, doubt, what am I doing? Is this ever going to work? But every day you get up and you just push forward. So, I think it's a tried and true formula. It doesn't mean you're going to get success. But if you don't go that route, you definitely won't get success.
Definitely. And that's very inspiring. I think, I think, in our world today, a lot could be said on this, but of course there's a lot of more instant gratification with the internet. And I think on social media, people see everyone's highlight reel, like on Instagram, and they're seeing people when they've hit success, or they've seen people who are portraying an image as if they are successful, where even though it could all be rented planes and who knows. And I think a lot of people get discouraged, or they feel like maybe they're a failure or they're not doing something right. They don't see those, like, your 10 years of hustle and driving around and all the no's and the you probably had to build a strong stomach of rejection, which I guess you did early on doing the paper. Yeah.
If I could just say one other fact. Sure. I also, and again, this is all in my resume here, but after all these brands, I went back to NYU and I became a certified business coach, right? I took a year out and I enjoyed it. I was in school with a lot of 20-year-olds. It was, a little funny, and they quickly knew I wasn't a beginner. But when I started to coach people, I'll tell you what I think the number one issue is for today's entrepreneurs: focus. That's the number one issue. I would meet a team or an individual. I would do every 2 weeks. We'd come up with a little plan. Here's some things we want to work on for the next 2 weeks. And almost 100% of the time, I come back in 2 weeks. Oh, no, we're going here now. Oh, we're heading here now. We're heading here now. I'd say, wait a minute, what happened to the plan 2 weeks ago? And I also have friends and business associates all around me that are involved with 20 projects. A lot of real estate guys, by the way. They're doing real estate. They're in Oregon. They're upstate New York. Hey, listen, maybe it works for some people, but I tell people as much as I can, find something you believe in and put all your focus on that. And don't get detoured every 5 minutes, every 5 days. Give it time, be laser beam focused, and you're going to have a better chance of success.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. I laser like focus, and I think that is a big problem. I think maybe the shiny object syndrome, or the fact that we just always have so much going on. We're watching a show while we're scrolling our Facebook feed on our phone. We're always, we have a podcast on while we're cooking and talking to our spouse. Like the attention is so divided today. And maybe that's why. And just a funny story, I once had a friend. It was he was, I guess he was trying to start a business. He wanted to be an entrepreneur. He was telling me his business ideas. I think in the span of a 24-hour period, he went from he's going to have a tutoring company to like 3 or 4 other different businesses. And I was just like, good luck with that. But you need to be focused. That's what a lot of people do, because to build one business, especially a first business, it just requires so much dedication that you can't be in so many different places. It's just not going to work. So to switch gears a little bit, it sounds like, even before you got into the hair care business and building brands, you really honed the craft of selling. I think sales is a huge key to success in entrepreneurship. I tell people all the time, like, if you have a business, like I think sales is very important. Either you have to be great at sales or you have to partner with someone who is. I think sales is the oxygen of a business. Everything I do, I base, off sales. And personally, I realized that pretty quickly, and I got into really reading sales books, anything I could find, podcasts about sales, trying to get better at the craft of sales. So it sounds like you built your business in the early days based on traditional hustle and door to door and cold calling or on the phone. How did you hone your sales skills? What are a few tips that you can share with my audience about effective selling?
Well, that's a fair question, and I think the fair answer is also that some people have a better sales DNA. Okay, that's for sure. If you are blessed with that, then you're blessed. If you're not, you can still do great, but you got to realize that. 2 things that are interesting. One is, in my view, from what I've read in many years, the number one position in the country as far as compensation is sales. Okay, salespeople make the most money. Salespeople are the highest percentage of CEOs of major corporations, right? So sales makes it all happen. If it doesn't happen in sales, it's not going to happen. So you may have that DNA, you may not. The other thing I would say is speaking in public, and you probably know this, sales is speaking in public. You may have a one-on-one, you may have a group, you may have a whole auditorium. Speaking in public is the number one fear of human beings. Okay. And I don't know if you've ever read that. It's an absolute fact. It's above sickness and death, which is, wow, it's more scary than death.
There's a funny, just quickly, there's a very funny Seinfeld joke about that. He says that means that at a funeral, the person would rather be in the coffin than the one delivering the eulogy.
It could be, right. That's true. And I've seen people, and I tell you, I've done hundreds of speeches. I still get that nice feeling in my belly. So I think, doing it is very important. And I would say there are some old time things. I'm going to mention some. I don't know if anyone's going to know what it is, but they can go find out. And the gentleman I'll mention is no longer with us. There's a guy named Zig Ziglar. If anybody ever heard of him, Zigler, and he was a sales trainer, professional, his entire life, motivator. The other book is Andrew Carnegie, right? Andrew Carnegie book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. Some people in today's world might laugh when they hear me say that. They've sold 80 million copies of that in every country in the world.
It's a classic. It's foundational.
And you want to get to that. One tip I'll give people in sales, I've given many people, is knowing when to shut up. Okay, it's a bad problem. Most salespeople talk themselves out of a sale. How? I'm talking to Zeb and I say, Zeb, I'd like to ship you that order. The container's ready to go. It's $100,000. We'd like you to say yes. Can I ship the order? Now I shut up. I don't say another word until you respond. Most salespeople, there's a little pause in the middle. They start talking again. They break the whole thing and it's over. It's just a little technique, but I will tell you something. It absolutely works. It's when you close, you put the close and then you stop. That's it.
That's a very important point. I've gotten better at it, but yeah.
It's on you That's it. And there is a famous story, we don't know if it's real, of a salesman who goes into a guy's office and he makes the pitch. I think it had to do with insurance. And he says, this is the greatest product, we put together for you. You need it. We'd like you to sign the paper. What do you say? And they sit there for 1 hour looking at each other. No one says a word. And finally, the guy behind the desk says, you got a deal, and he signs it. Now, is it true? I don't know. But one thing's for sure, and I'll mention this, the last part. It sounds funny. Ask for the order. How many salespeople I know, I've seen it. They go in, appointment, everything's nice, hello, and they're laughing and they're shaking hands and everyone's having a great time. They leave. I said, you didn't ask for the order.
Right.
They go, what do you mean? I said, you didn't ask for the order. Well, I'll give you the other one. You got me going here too much, but it's objective. When I would go in to do a sales call, when I go into Walmart or Walgreens, I don't just say, oh, I'm going to go in and have a nice appointment. I go in and I have a list of things I want to share and I want to accomplish and I want to say. I may not get them all out, but if I don't write them down or at least think about them, I'm not there to have a good time. I'm not there to ask the buyer how their kids are or how's Walmart's business this quarter. That's not what I'm there for. I'm there to get an order. I'm there to get more distribution, more SKUs. I know you're going to let me talk about my new project as well that is not in bricks and mortar, which is interesting.
Yeah, so I want to get into that too. And before we get into that, one other question, just, I think those are great selling tips. I'll add one more. Just once you've actually made the sale, also shut up and get out of there. People can ruin it at the end. So, you're a serial entrepreneur, you're a brand builder. Obviously, your sales skills served you very well. But also building a strong brand, as I tell people, putting my marketing and social media hat on, I tell them, if you build a strong brand, you become well known, you have a reputation that precedes you, you have you have something that people are attracted to emotionally. You actually don't have to do as much hard selling because people come to you. So what are some of the most important ingredients that are needed when building a strong product brand? And what do you think makes someone choose one brand over another, even when the products might be similar?
Sure, it's a good question that if I really knew 100% the answer to that, I would be a lot richer than I am today. Listen, I answer that question very simply. That let's take shampoos, okay? It's very interesting. I'm going to talk about this new brand, My Israel's Miracle, in a minute, in response to the amount of competitors in the world of Amazon. Okay, let's go there. In the world of Walmart, it's different. But let's say it this way. Even in Walmart, if I lined up every shampoo right in front of you, so I'd have to get a shelf this high, maybe there'll be a couple hundred shampoos. Let me say it as simply as I can to whoever's listening. These products are going to wash your hair. They're not going to make you a better human being. They're not going to make you win the lottery. They're not going to make your marriage better. They're shampoos. But there are elements to those shampoos that trigger something in your mind, something very simple, emotional. There's something emotional. There's a reason someone buys a $2.99 Suave product, which has been around forever, Suave, the low end, and a shampoo. And then there's a reason a woman buys an 8-ounce, same size product from L'Oreal called Kerastase for $50. What is the reason for the person to spend the $50 as opposed to the $2.99? Or then they have every other choice in between, 7, 10, 12, 15, 18. There's something emotional that happens. Now, with African Pride, it was the most emotional thing of all time. It had to do with heritage. It had to do with history. It had to do with a moment of other things happening. So that one, the emotion was very, very strong. Dr. Miracles, the emotion a lot had to do with the efficacy of the product. By the way, fictional character, Dr. Miracles, of course, but 98% of the people thought he was real. Let's go there. that he was a
Wow.
real doctor, that he was a chemist, that he helped his mother and his father. That's the emotion. And I will hold this up just to say it. Okay, this is my Israel's miracle. And I think, and I'll tell you the negative that we're having here and the problem, because it's not all perfect. When you talk about emotion, this is probably the most emotional product I've ever come out with. And if I can just tell you how this happened, I've owned the trademark, My Israel's Miracle, for probably 15 or 16 years. One of the things I would tell all your listeners is intellectual property is gold. Don't just, oh, it's my trademark, I'll get to it later. And I've heard all of this stuff. Oh, I don't have to register, do I? Yes, you do. When you sell, that's what you're going to sell. Clear intellectual property, and that's what they want, the big boys. So with My Israel's Miracle, I had it. So one company, they got it, they dropped it, they don't want to pay the $200, literally. Next company, private equity, I sell, they get the trademark. There's no brand, it's just a name, and they drop it. So this has been something I've wanted to do for a while. It's I'm a little emotional about it, which I don't recommend as a marketer, but I am, because I began also to go to Israel on a regular basis, 7 times now,
Wow.
and just fall in love with the place. Okay,
Sure.
we are using on this product are US manufacturers who I've worked with for 25 and 30 years in Chicago, 3 PhDs in chemistry on staff. The product itself is amazing. We brought in the organic, Israeli organic herbs, okay? Some that go back to the Bible. We use some En-Gedi water, which is amazing. If any of your listeners have ever been there,
I've been there. Yeah.
that is like, you can't describe it. And then argan oil, which is so popular, it all comes from Morocco, but now there are some trees, a couple hundred in Israel as well. So
It's also mentioned in the Bible, I think. Yeah.
yeah, I think so. And they've taken those ingredients and we've, formed the product. If I could say something, I'll be perfectly honest, as I have all along here today. I've had great success in bricks and mortar. Amazon has been more of a challenge.
Yeah,
Why?
let's dive into that. I was going to bring up your product at the end, but now we're talking about it.
Whatever.
Let's combine the two, because I think they're connected. You've had a lot of experience with brick and mortar. You came up in that, and now you're transitioning to the world of e-commerce, dealing with Amazon. Maybe you could tell my listeners a little bit about how that's been, and what are some challenges maybe you've had now getting your new venture, My Israel Miracles, to
Yes,
launch.
happy to do it. I'll just say one thing. Most people who know me say, why didn't you go back to the big boys? Well, first of all, I'm not positioning this just as an ethnic product, but that's not the real reason. In the 5 or 6 years since I've sold Walmart and guys like that, Walmart's gone from a 37-day payer, 37 days, to like 103 today. Okay. Walmart, Target, all of them. They used to do a thing where you put your product in the planogram. A year later, you looked at it, you evaluated it, you checked your metrics, all that fun stuff. Now you put the product out, 13 weeks. How's it selling? How's it doing? If not good enough, out the door. Out the door, they mark it down 25%. Then they mark it down the week later 50%. Then they mark it down 75%. Disaster. So they've gotten very difficult. There's even a company out there called Sally Beauty.
Mm-hmm.
5,000 stores. New guy gets in there, new brand, 6 months to get their first payment. So when I looked at that, and I knew how tough retail was. It was always tough, but this is like another level. And why? We all know why, because Amazon is kicking their butts. We get it. Amazon is a consignment house. You send them your stuff, you don't even get paid until it sells. Walmart's got billions of dollars sitting in their warehouse, so they've had to adjust. So it's been very interesting, that decision. The decision early on was simple. Let's go to Amazon. We know we're going to make some waves, and then we can go and get ourselves into the retail world. Well, interesting thing. On some of our products, there are hundreds of thousands of competitors on Amazon. It's hard to believe. Like a shampoo, I don't even know what I have in my hand here. Let's leave it. But any of our products, there's 200,000 to 300,000 competitors on that system. When I used to sell in Walmart, it was 200 or 300 brands on the shelf. You could just look as a consumer. So the amount of people, anyone with $39.99 is on Amazon. right? You pay your monthly fulfillment by Amazon. So we've found it a challenge because of the sheer amount of companies we're competing with. I'll tell you something else I find to be a challenge. Something that I get, it's my age. You guys are used to it, but I get sick when I hear this word, algorithm. You know what that means to me? It means we don't know, we don't understand it, and we can't explain it to you. That's what algorithm means to me. So when companies that I know have done something, and some of them, it could have been counterfeit goods, whatever, but nothing serious. So other guys, they push the button in the morning, they're off. They're off Amazon. And they're going to try to contact someone. There's nobody to contact.
Yeah.
The other frustration for me, I'll just say, I'm smiling still, which is a good thing. But the other frustration is the whole Amazon advertising platform. Many people unwittingly or all of a sudden look and say, wait a minute, my A cost is 200%. It's 150%. And for the viewers out there who don't know what that means I'm spending $2 to sell $1. And then some of the thought with Amazon is, oh, that's fine. You're building your reputation and the algorithm is going to like it. So we have found Amazon to be a challenge. It's been a challenge. We're here. We're not going anywhere. Every chance I get, I'm going to hold up my product and say, hey, there's my Israel's miracle. I would definitely say to anybody listening, male, female, you try that product. We also had a master perfumer, 30-year master perfumer that we've dealt with, come up with our own proprietary fragrance. People love it. So we have a great product. And we are supporting Israel. We work with Hatzalah. We support them, Hatzalah in Israel.
Mhm.
And we think one of the greatest things you can do is get a product that uses stuff from Israel or a pure made in Israel, if you like that. That's the best way to support Israel. And to send a message to the BDS movement, which is not good for anybody.
Yeah, just for the listeners at home, Hatzalah is a basically a huge nonprofit that does medical care. They'll treat anyone, Jewish, Arab, they don't care. They'll treat anyone who needs medical attention, and they'll be able to ride to people who might be who are Sabbath observant and can get them to a hospital, even though they may not drive or whatever on Sabbath. And you said BDS, yeah, that's boycott, divestment, sanctions. For those that don't know, there are people who want to boycott the only Jewish state, and this is not a political podcast, but I think that these are great causes that you are that your brand is tied to, towards helping the state of Israel.
Yes, and needs the help, but so that's where we're at. I'm not at the point, maybe if you speak to me a year or two from now, I'm going to have a better story to tell. And I'll also say one thing, and I don't mind saying this either. Don't be afraid of failure if you're an entrepreneur. Don't be afraid. I want to know one entrepreneur, whether his name is Bill Gates, his name was Steve Jobs, his name is Elon Musk. You give me any of those names, and of course, Jeff Bezos, because he was a total flop in his early years. That had everything they touched turned to gold. If you hear that and it's being represented, I think you're being lied to, because that's not the way it works. So failure, horrible, depressing. I can't even get deeper than that, but you got to be prepared to deal with that, because that's part of the entrepreneurial process. Not everything goes to the roof. Not everything.
Right. Yeah. I once heard an analogy, it was from Gary Vee, was saying that boxing is like the kind of sport where like a defeat can just take you out. Like you have very few matches, you try to go undefeated. But he said entrepreneurship is more like UFC fighting, where you take a lot of losses, and losses are part of the deal you sign up for, but you get better from them, you learn from them, but they're not avoidable. You have to take rejection, you have to take setbacks and failures. It's how you respond, right?
Yes. Well, listen, the other thing that we don't like, and we've all been through it, I've been through it, when you're the new kid on the block, they take advantage of you. All right, they do. They demand more from you. Okay,
Mhm.
you know, they ask stuff from you. You didn't ask Procter and Gamble that. They're not going to give us that. So they ask you. And distributors are notorious. I had a distributor. I don't know if you guys can get the story real quick. Guy was in his 70s, very, very wealthy guy. No names here. Jewish also. And when I started doing business with him, I said, "Oh, this is great. We're really going to bond." We never did. And 20 years later, he would sit in his chair in his office with his 3 minions, and you'd go in with your guys, and he'd ask for something. He'd ask for something that's he shouldn't get. You know, we're not giving it to anyone else. The answer is no. He would sit back and say, "This isn't going to change my standard of living." That was the famous line, which was to a young entrepreneur, it was like a knife in your back. But that's the mentality. You know, we have the power. We want you to do what we want you to do. And I found distributors, I had relationships, so millions and millions of dollars. I came out with the second brand, African Pride. I changed my discount structure slightly. Oh, we're not your friend anymore. We're your enemy. What happened? 10 years we were friends. So you said it best. You said it best. And, you know, I think you got to be prepared for all that. And you do, to some degree, have to have a little bit of that duck thing. What's the duck thing? The way the water rolls off your back.
Yeah.
I'll just say it. I don't want to get into too deep because I could think of 1,000 times where a distributor or even a consumer or a chain did something, and I was a younger man. I didn't have any. I went, "Oh my God!" You know, I can't believe it. I can't believe they're doing this,
Mhm.
but they're doing it. So it's not an easy game, that's for sure.
Oh yeah, and I'll say, you know, I'm much earlier in my career than you, to say the least. But I will say that I've learned over the years, like I mean, I got burned pretty bad at the very beginning, some people, but then I also learned that you know, there's something in a service business too. There's a lot of there's what you might call scope creep, where people will ask for more and more. Setting boundaries comes important, but I've learned that a lot of things you can compromise, you can set boundaries, and sometimes you just say, you know what, I'm eager to prove myself. If it's not breaking too much of a boundary or it's not going to put me out of business, I'll go, you know, go the extra mile, and it will be a long term. It will be a big benefit.
Sure,
Um,
sure.
but
And
yeah,
you got to think that way. That's true.
sure. Well, thank Brian. Thank you so much.
Am I allowed to hold up my product again?
Oh, of course.
I mean,
Go ahead.
I really want your listeners to know that this is the highest quality product we've ever made. We have 6 SKUs. You can look them up on Amazon under My Israel Miracle. And honestly, we'd appreciate any support, comments, questions, anything you can send to Zev as well. And we believe in this thing and we want you to give it a try.
Yeah, and if those of you who may be listening to this or you're watching but can't read the print, I'm going to link in the show notes. I'm going to put My Israel Miracles website, the Amazon. You can go check it out yourself. I encourage you all to check it out. And Brian, thank you so much for being here. It was really a pleasure. I think my listeners learned a lot.
And
And I
listen,
look forward.
Deb, any of you listeners, and I made this offer a few times, I can't do 100 people. If there's a couple of you listeners, young guys that are working something and it's hitting them, what I'm talking about, and they want to talk, and they want to show me something, they want to run something by me, I'm happy to do it. It's free of charge.
Wow, that is really generous. No one's ever made an offer like that here. People listening, you've already listened. Brian's a seasoned entrepreneur, a business coach. He's willing to give you some free coaching. That is an amazing opportunity. I definitely encourage everyone to also take advantage of that. Wow. Thank you. Brian, thank you so much. Look forward to
We'll be
speaking
in
with you
touch,
again soon.
okay? Thank you.